Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for us to build the most beautiful gaming PC I think you've ever seen on this channel? Because today, that is the sole aim. We've We've grabbed some of the latest and greatest components that are all about beauty, including this case here, which is the Lian Li O11 Vision. We've got the RTX 4070 Ti Supermaster, and of course a whole host of gaming PC components with the aim really to create something that is truly breathtakingly beautiful, but also still has flawless gaming performance that's going to be perfect at pretty much any resolution. A massive thank you to Gigabyte for actually sponsoring this video. Let's get started. Now, to be honest with you, I think the only way that we can properly kick this video off is actually to start with a little bit of a home truth, which is that if you are going to go for the most beautiful gaming PC that you can build, obviously it's going to cost you more money than if you're just going for raw performance because, well, the inexpensive components are the ones that don't always have like the fancy fans or the fancy lighting, and they don't have all of the glass. And to be fair, this is actually one of the cheaper Lian Li chassis, certainly in the O11 range. They've actually just announced a compact version of this. I did a full video on this actually at Computex 2024. You can find this in the top right corner of your screen. But other than that, this is the cheapest O11 you can get. And the main difference between this and some of the more expensive ones is pretty much just that the top is actually glass. So if this is going to be on your desk, you can see into it and it will look even cooler. But obviously this does come at the cost. Well, it doesn't come at the cost of cost. It comes at the cost of airflow because you don't have that natural convection that will take the heat above it. So you've got to counteract this with some extra fans, but to be honest with you, it's not really a problem. You can actually move this motherboard tray down a little bit as well, have two 120s at the back if you want to do that. But even in its default configuration, as long as you are buying the extra fans, because this doesn't come with any, then you shouldn't have too much of a problem. So we're going to use this potentially as an exhaust at the back. We're going to have intake down here, and then obviously that fan to exhaust the heat. And in their tests, I don't think there was too much difference. But yes, if you want better ventilation, spend a little bit more and get the O11 dynamic. But I think this definitely looks a little bit better just because you can see more into your rig, and you also get extra light comes in because of course it is glass. It's also dual chamber as well if you haven't worked that one out. So you will need a fair amount of space on your desk. There is a hard drive cage here that I've already taken out. Did actually do a full build in this. I did like a live build. You can find that in the top right corner of your screen as well. But I didn't want you guys to miss out on this because it's a really nice case actually. And I wanted to see like a more normal build inside this. You can put a load of SSDs, RGB hubs and things here. You can move different bits and bobs around. So yes, a very nice, well laid out case that should be pretty easy to work in, but obviously you're going to need a PC to actually put inside here. And Gigabyte have sent this one out. This is the B650 Eagle AX, and this actually saved themselves a little bit of money on the rest of the build. You can find this for around about £150 at the time of filming. Obviously it's AMD, AM5. It doesn't have PCI Gen 5 on the 16X slot. That is one of the main compromises. You'll need to go for B650E if you do want to get that, but for what most people actually need, especially what you need today, then this is going to be more than sufficient. And it's still a good looking board as well. It's got quite a lot going on. I mean, the VRMs aren't as massive as you'll find on some more expensive motherboards, but you've got pretty much everything that you want. You also get PCI Gen 5 on this top SSD slot, and you get Wi-Fi on the board as standard as well. So if you don't actually work next to an Ethernet jack, that is going to be quite useful. But this is not the most feature-rich motherboard in the world, but if you're a gamer and you want to spend your money on other components and you're not fussed about overclocking and things like that, then obviously this is going to be a great choice. And I do want to say that when I started planning this rig, I thought it would actually be potentially a little bit more useful rather than doing like a perfect build, to sort of show you the reality of spending more money on maybe like better looking components and what this could mean for everything else. So we've actually gone for a CPU that I would say it's absolutely fine, but personally I would actually want to go for a slightly better one. So this is the Ryzen 7700. It's the non-X. It runs at 65 watts or so, which is great. It means you don't have to spend as much money on a cooler. But obviously the reality is that if you are going to go for those expensive RGB fans, then that is money you could have put towards, say, the 7800 X3D, which will have better gaming performance. And so you're essentially choosing a better looking system over the extra potential gaming performance. Now, if you are running at like high 1440p or 4K, I don't think it's going to be a night and day difference, and wanting to go for a better looking rig may well be the right choice for you. But I do want to sort of showcase the performance a little bit later, and if we see any bottlenecking, this will prove that RGB costs FPS. But anyway, let's grab our 8-core 7700 CPU. We'll drop this down into the slot. Obviously, you should be able to get this a little bit cheaper now as the new AMD Ryzen chips have been announced. And actually, on that point, I probably should point out that this is a motherboard that does support USB BIOS flashing. So if you do want to go for this rig and you don't already have like a 7000 chip to update the BIOS, then you can do this just by getting the latest BIOS on a USB flash drive, FAT32. I've made a video actually all about flashing your BIOS. You can find that in the top right corner of your screen. You literally just whack this into the BIOS port on the back, and then there's a button on the inside actually, which is here, that says Q Flash Plus, and assuming you've set everything up properly, you've got it powered on, then this will just sort of flash the BIOS for you, and then your PC can restart, and then you'll be able to use this CPU, even though when you bought the motherboard, it didn't actually natively support AMD 9000. Of course, we're also going to need to grab ourselves some memory or some RAM. This is 6400 megahertz. This is actually a Ryzen optimized kit, which is why it says AMD EXPO on the side of it. And if you are wondering what the main difference is between the upcoming X870 motherboards, X870E as well, versus the existing X and B series, it's mainly down to extra bandwidth. You get dual USB 4, but then also faster memory speeds on that platform. But I don't think it's not, like, it will come a point where obviously it's worth going for it, but at launch the motherboards will be really expensive. There won't be the cheaper B series motherboards as well. So if you are looking to upgrade to like the ultimate gaming PC, then obviously yes, you're going to want to look at those motherboards. But for the time being, I would actually say just stick with the cheaper B series motherboards until you get some form of price parity. In terms of the RAM, by the way, if you haven't seen this before, all I'm doing is just lining it up in dual channel operation, so slots 2 and slots 4, and obviously make sure they're facing the right way, and then you push them down into place. As far as our SSD storage is concerned, we're not going for PCIe Gen 5 because, again, really not worth at the time of filming. Prices are definitely coming down, which is good. Heat sinks are getting better, but still nowhere near the point where I'd say it's recommended to everyone. Instead, just look for a really fast PCIe Gen 4 drive. This is the Seagate Firecuda 530. We've used this loads of times on the channel, and it is very good. That is not the right screwdriver.
God, can't get the staff. Edit the car. Have you not put my screwdrivers away properly?
The joke is that he doesn't even work here. He's got his own studio. It's entirely my fault.
We'll open up this top SSD slot just by removing one screw. We'll take off this protective cover on the heatsink. We'll grab our SSD and then we'll just line this up with the top slot. Obviously, if you do go for a PCIe Gen 5 SSD at a later date, you'll have to move this down and then put that Gen 5 one in the top slot. Then of course you just need to put this back together again and screw this down. And then at this stage, believe it or not, that's actually the most difficult bit done. All you need to do is now get this inside our chassis, plug our fans in, get everything connected to the motherboard, graphics card, power supply, and then we're done. So that sounds like quite a few tasks, but I promise this was the most difficult bit so far. All we need to do is just drop this down into position. There is this little catch here that will kind of hold it into place. Grab the screws that come with the chassis and then neatly secure that into place. Once you've done that, you should then be greeted with something that resembles this. Nice, secure motherboard, and as you can see, loads of space here. But I would advise that you start by turning this around and then grabbing all of the cables that you need to plug into the motherboards. Yours will probably look neater than this, but as I say, I've already built on this. Our USB-C is this one in the middle of the motherboard, and then just above that is the USB 3. Down the bottom, you've got your front panel, and then all the way on the left of that, you've got your HD or front panel audio. With that done and out of the way, we can now move on to beautifying our gaming PC. And the way I'm doing it is actually with Corsair's ICUE Link system, because I think this is the easiest fan control and RGB system out there. It's really nice to work with. I will say though that Lian Li's own fans, the AL-V2, I've actually got a box here. These are probably my favorite fans overall at the moment, but the Lian Li software still needs a little bit of work in my opinion, but I really love these. I've actually used these in my personal rig, top right hand corner of your screen. So I wanted to go for something a little bit different, and I also wanted to show you the differences as well between the QX fans that you get with this ICUE Link cooler and then the new RX fans. And I now understand the way that they have sort of named these. The X essentially means that it's ICUE Link, which makes no sense whatsoever, and I told Corsair this. How does X mean ICUE Link? Stupid. Anyway, these are actually slightly better performing fans, but they're not going to match these, so I thought if we use both, you can obviously see what you like, and then the upcoming Corsair titanium coolers will come with the RX fans and would bring the whole cost down. But obviously, if you do want to bring the cost of this down and still have something that looks great, then probably look at maybe going for like Deepcool fans and like the Deepcool LS720. That's a nice alternative for this. It won't look quite as good and won't be as easy to control, but will save yourself a fair bit of money because this stuff is pretty expensive. Installing the fans is extremely straightforward. Just make sure you've got it in the right orientation. So we're using this as like an exhaust, and then obviously grab the 4 screws, and these Corsair screws are actually like quick install screws, which are pretty cool. Then just line this up with the back and get that nice and secure. Installing the bottom ones should be pretty straightforward. They're easy to miss, but you do actually have 2 screws that secure like a bracket down the bottom in, so you can do this outside of your chassis, and then that should slide and remove. Then you can remove your 3 fans, and the clever bit is that they do actually daisy chain and interlock together. It should be as straightforward as just lining them up and pushing them into position. Then we can place these on our bracket. Again, fit them down with the quick-fire screws, and then you can pick the whole thing up as one big unit and just drop that into place. It should go without saying, of course, that these fans aren't magic. They need some power. They need to actually push some air. And the way that Corsair do this, and the main benefit of this ICUE Link system that is quite literally a game changer, is that everything is controlled with one of these hubs. So you'll get this plugged into USB for control, and then a 6-pin PCIe for power, and then you use these cables, of which you do get some in the box, but not always enough. You might need to order an X one, which is another expense, very annoying, rent for another day. But essentially you just plug this into the hub like so, and then you will plug into the block of fans. And you can actually daisy chain these together as well. So this could go into this could go into a radiator. There are some restrictions, but generally speaking, that's how it works, and it is very straightforward. As you'd probably expect, the cooler works in exactly the same way, but you should get everything that you need inside the box. And I do always like that everything is pre-assembled for you, assuming that you do actually want it in this orientation. So we're using this as an exhaust, so I don't actually need to set this up at all. I can literally drop this straight in the rig. So let's do exactly that then, shall we, and get our cooler in place, tubes downwards if you can. This top piece should actually slide out as well, which will make our life a little bit easier so I can actually see what I'm doing, and then we can get this safe and secure. I mean, to be fair to Lian Li as well, you can actually take this whole bracket out, I believe, and slot it in like we did with the other fans. With that in, we then need to grab our AMD mounting plate and screws. These brackets literally just slide on the top until they meet. Remove the default AM5 mounting hardware with these 4 screws and these 2 bits of plastic. Grab these tiny little AMD standoffs, screw those into the board. Most people watching this will probably buy a brand new CPU cooler, and a lot of the time, this one included, it actually comes with thermal compound pre-applied, but because I've used this before, I'm gonna grab some funky purple thermal paste and just put a pea-sized amount in the middle of the CPU. Then I'm gonna pick up our pump head and just lay this over the top, and then pick up these large nuts and screw it down into position. Do this in like a cross pattern as well, so you don't put too much pressure on the CPU socket. And then unfortunately, this is the bit where I'm afraid things get a little bit more difficult, because the whole point of this system is that it's supposed to be easy, but I'm now realizing that these cables are just a little bit too short to actually do my runs. Okay, well, I've done the best that I can, but I still think this probably isn't gonna work, because this is essentially all the cables that we have in the box. So at the moment, we've gone in here, we're then going into the pump, we're then going back out into this block of 3, and then obviously we've got a separate channel for this one here. But if you're following along at home and it gets to the point where it doesn't work, you will have to buy an extra long cable as well, just to connect the extra block of fans. But that wouldn't be the end of the world, but I'm kind of thinking at this stage, maybe we should have just gone for Lian Li fans. Just 2 cables to plug in at the moment, one being USB 2 right down the bottom. And then all the way at the top, we have the CPU dummy header that essentially just stops your motherboard from freaking out. Everything is actually controlled within the pump itself. It looks at the coolant temp and then adjusts accordingly. But obviously you can change loads of different settings in ICUE if you want to do that. But I've found that actually out the box, it works rather well. But you know what? That's enough moaning for one day. How about we actually move on to the most exciting part of any gaming PC build, the graphics card. And obviously this is pretty high end, and I mean this in 2 different steps. Firstly being this is a 4070 Ti Super, which is obviously new from Nvidia. It's definitely not good value. You're spending a lot of money to get a very high-end GPU, but if you need those frames, obviously it's one of the cheaper ways of getting higher frame rates on a 4K screen. But then also this is a little bit more high-end in terms of the spec of the card itself. This is the Gigabyte AORS Master, but they do have plenty of other options available if you do want to save yourself a little bit of money. So you get a bigger cooler on this one. It definitely looks pretty chunky, pretty meaty too. This bit should light up and look pretty good. But obviously, as I say, if you do want to save yourself like £50, 100, you can buy like a gaming OC or an Eagle or something like that. But this is the top-end Master 4070 Ti Super. If you haven't already, do remove the PCIe slot covers for slots number 2 and 3, and then you can grab your GPU and then line this up with the slot. Hopefully the tubes don't get in the way, or that would be quite annoying. No, I think we'll be all right actually. And then that can just go like that into position. And actually, hiding those tubes, I'm not against that. If I can neaten those up, I think that'll look rather good. But let's keep it together for just a couple more minutes, because there's just one more component left to install. That, of course, being the power supply. And if you're buying a new one, I would recommend that you go for ATX 3 or ideally 3.1 like we have in here, especially if you're going for an NVIDIA graphics card, because essentially that gives you that PCI Gen 5 cable in one go. You don't have to use horrible adapters or anything like that, and it makes your whole rig a lot neater. And this is one from Deepcool, and it should work a dream. It's also 850 watts, which is a little bit overkill, not by much, but it's definitely a little bit more power than we need for this. But to be honest, there's going to be future NVIDIA graphics cards in the future. All of the rumors that I'm hearing are that the top end ones are going to consume more power, so being ready for that today is definitely going to be helpful. As you can clearly tell, this is a fully modular power supply, so all of the cables are separate. You don't have to use all of the ones that you don't need, especially in a case like this where it's quite visual. You don't want to have a load of cable clutter. But I do quite like the fact that the cables are kind of like semi-braided here. Granted, it's not as good as like a third-party one from Cable Mod or something like that, but this is far more attractive than your standard cable we get in the box, which is pretty good from something that isn't actually crazily expensive in the first place. So let's plug all the connections that we're actually going to need into our PSU. Then I believe all we need to do is just line this up in our chassis. Obviously make sure that the fan can breathe. It's got like a side channel in the case. Don't have it facing the other way or it'll be literally blowing nothing. Then it should really just be a case of managing these cables and routing them through to the motherboard where they need to plug in. And then before we actually plug those in, obviously make sure you do connect our hub to the single PCIe. And then hopefully for the final time, we can give this one more spin and then get everything else connected. So our 600 watt PCIe can go to our 4070 Ti Super. Then you have your CPU at the top, and then your ATX on the side. And then, ladies and gentlemen, once you've neatened that up, I think that is our PC rig pretty much done. As I say, I'm really pleased actually with how this has come out, and I didn't expect the graphics card to literally be the glue to hold everything together. We need to obviously put it back together, but you can see the advantages and the challenges really with going for like an all glass case, because the more you can see in, well, the more you can see in and the more difficult it is. I've had to move cables and things around constantly. Obviously we've been cutting and sort of working on this. You've not been watching the full live stream, right? It is difficult to get this to look really nice and tasty, but I think if you can pull it off, it will be worth it. But whether this Corsair system has made this a lot easier than going for Lian Li fans, I think the jury's out a little bit on this. But what it does do is mean that round the back is ridiculous. Have you ever had a system with this many fans and this much going in with cable management like this? This was not difficult either, and everything has just been routed through as simply as that. I mean, the power supply helps as well in combination with that GPU if we've not got loads of PCIe connections. But then again, we do also have one there for the hub. So I'm definitely pretty pleased, but let me know your thoughts on this down in the comment section below. Have I done a good job? Of course, the question on everybody's minds is, where can I get a PC Centric mouse mat? And the answer is linked down below, shortly followed by, does this thing actually work? And have I got to find another cable to get the fans at the bottom to spin? Let us find out. We have this plugged in. The on switch is on the left-hand side. Let's go. Well, I've got some spinning, which is good. Actually, all of the fans are spinning, which was potentially unexpected. But yes, there you can see, so far, we only have RGB on the one section. But then the bottom ones are spinning. So maybe it's getting confused, but maybe it's gonna work. We've also got RGB on the graphics card, look. And more importantly, our system actually works. There we are, brand new CPU installed. Press Y to reset the FTPM. Here we are, BIOS has been reset, so I can very quickly show you what I do with all of my new rigs. It's very straightforward. We just want to find XMP. We'll set this to EXPO 1. Usually I'd also tune the fans, but obviously everything is controlled by Corsair. Save and exit. Your system will then restart, and because I've already got a copy of Windows on this, it's loaded back into it, but I do need to plug in the Ethernet cable. If you're watching this though, and you don't have a copy of Windows on your SSD, I've made a full video how to install it. It's really straightforward. You can find that in the top right corner of your screen, but then you'll be ready to press on to the games. And through the power of editing, ladies and gentlemen, here we are, all set up and ready to go. And I've got to admit, We've done a good job here. I think this is an absolutely stunning looking gaming PC, and it stands out because it is a little bit different as well. I mean, yes, obviously you've got like fish tank PC cases everywhere now, but I still don't think there are really too many that have this whole like frame-like design where you've got the glass on the top. And because you don't have any form of bezel or anything here, it does make the panels a little bit loose and wobbly. So if you had old-fashioned hard drives, I would be a little bit cautious to make sure they're properly damped or your whole PC might start vibrating. But for what most people are going to use, I think this is absolutely stunning. And I will say as well actually that the difference between the new RX fans and the QX fans that we have here isn't that crazy when you've got it like this. I mean, yes, they are definitely different. I would recommend that you match them up for the best aesthetic, really. But I was expecting it to be night and day, but I don't think it is. Obviously, the main difference is that you've got the dual light loops on the QX, but then you have the slightly better performance, but the slightly worse RGB on the RX. I don't like that you can actually see the individual LEDs, which is a little bit annoying, but I've got to say it's turned out even better than I thought. But let me know your thoughts on this down in the comment section below. So those are certainly the aesthetics, but let's jump into some gameplay and actually see what a gaming PC is all about and what exactly this system can do. What you're seeing now is the latest Horizon game. This is Forbidden West. This came out a few months ago on PC, and we've got this set to the very high preset with DLSS 4K, but we are running this at DLSS performance. And this is pretty much what I alluded to earlier, really, when I say that for me, the 4070 Ti Super's like such a flexible card, and is what I would go for personally, because if you're running on a 4K screen, then running this, especially on a 27-inch monitor like we have here, at DLSS performance, it is very, very difficult to notice the difference between this and balance, quality, and native. That's not to say that you can't if you're pixel peeping, but you're going to be playing your games. Like, you can still get all of the effect of that extra resolution here, you're just relying on the AI to do the upscaling for you. Although one thing that I definitely will say is that it is going to depend on the game that you're playing, because if you're rocking something that is AMD FSR only, then I wouldn't want to rely on the upscaling, because it definitely doesn't do such a good job. If you're playing something like Horizon, then where you've got like fine detail in areas of grass and things, you'll notice if you do move the mouse quite quickly, then you'll see you get a little bit of artifacting. I almost call it dusting, because you have like these almost like bits of dust that kind of like surround the object. But again, you pretty much have to pixel peep to notice that, unless you're playing on like a 77-inch TV or something where obviously you can see more detail. But you can't really argue with the frame rate here, because what's that? We're getting around about 100 frames a second or so. And of course, don't forget that because this is one of the latest 40 series NVIDIA cards, you also get this feature down here called DLSS frame generation. And there's always a lot of confusion around this, despite the fact that we've talked about this a lot of the time. DLSS super resolution renders the game at a low resolution and upscales it. This actually decreases the latency, because your native FPS actually goes up, the time to actually process the frames goes down, and thus it is more responsive. Now, DLSS frame generation does add an ever so slight latency penalty, because it uses AI to actually put a frame in between rendered frames. So it goes rendered frame, AI, rendered, AI, and so forth. And as you can see, it has actually now increased the smoothness of our image, because our frame rate has gone from 86 to 100 frames a second. I'd say Horizon isn't necessarily one of the titles where it's like a dramatic difference, but it does depend on the settings that you're going to use. I'd say if you're getting about 60 FPS, that's the sweet spot, because you turn it on and you often get like 90 to 100, it's fantastic. Whereas here we're not seeing a dramatic difference, but it's certainly something that's nice to have, and is something that you can't get on the AMD or Intel cards, or sadly the 30 series, which is NVIDIA's previous generation. Moving on to our next title, we have one of my personal favorites. This is some Returnal, and this is running now at 1440p with our DLSS set to balanced, but now we've got ray tracing set to epic. So this is pretty much max settings, and we don't have DLSS frame gen enabled. And as you can see, we're still getting a very, very high frame rate with around about 100 FPS or so. And now we've actually got to an area with some combat. You can start to see all of the particle effects, and there's so much going on here. And this is also one of those games where I'd say the ray tracing is not only noticeable, but does actually make quite a big impact to the overall experience. Not because it's like a must-have, but this is a title where you've got so many different reflections and, like, as I say, particle effects and things going on, that there's almost like a lot more to gain by having the ray tracing. And bearing in mind you're able to do this at around about 100 FPS, that is not too shabby whatsoever. But let's see if this GPU can actually handle some 4K, shall we? We'll go into the graphics options as well, and we'll change DLSS Super Resolution to performance, and we'll turn frame gen on as well. So definitely all of the NVIDIA goodies now enabled, and actually our frame rate has now increased, which is pretty cool, around about 131 FPS. So yes, I'd probably recommend actually that you set that DLSS to balanced, or maybe keep it at performance, but then turn the frame generation off. It depends what you want, really. This is a game that's very much all about latency, so the lowest latency possible is always good. But yeah, this feels absolutely fantastic. The frame rate, generally speaking, is pretty smooth. There's a couple of spikes here and there, but this was more a problem with the game itself rather than the system that we've got running here. But that is our single player games out the way. Let's move across to our multiplayer, starting off with some Call of Duty Warzone. And again, this is running now at 1440p, DLSS set to quality, but everything else is set to extreme. And as you can see, even with that 7700 CPU, we're still getting a pretty monolithic, does that make any sense? Monumental frame rate, around about 195 FPS. That is not too shabby. And even if you are a budding professional Call of Duty player, I really don't think you're going to have an issue with this whatsoever. The game doesn't look quite as good as it would with DLSS off. This is one of the few titles that actually, I'd say, even at quality, you can still notice that you do have DLSS enabled, especially at 1440p and 1080p, but it's still a really awesome experience, and there's no reason for not being very good when you've got this level of frame rate. Let's see what happens though if we turn this up to 4K. Well, one thing's for sure, the in-game clarity has gone through the roof. This looks way, way better than it did at 1440p. Again, I think a lot of this is just down to the way that DLSS works. Clearly does work better at 4K than it does at 1440p, but everything is just a whole lot less, again, I'm going to use the word like dusty. You don't have as many like artifacts and things going on. It's not that it was bad before, it definitely wasn't, still was great, but if you do have a 4K monitor, you definitely will be able to have your cake and eat it. Even with the 70 Ti, it's a very expensive GPU, but it's not a 4090. And again, like, you should be able to play really well with a frame rate of about 100 to 130 FPS, but not when you're talking to the camera. But anyway, that was Call of Duty Warzone. How about a game that's actually for adults, some Fortnite? And I was about to sort of big it up and say that I've been playing it and I've got really good, but the evidence speaks otherwise. Oh, whoa, I was gassing again. This is a joke. This is stupid. Well, all right then, that didn't exactly go to plan. So let's start again. We jump out of the plane and we definitely do get a little bit of stutter, but I've played so many games of Fortnite, so many different systems. This seems to be whenever you go to a new area for the very first time on your system, it does some pre-caching or something clearly, because it does not happen the second time that you go down, assuming everything is working properly. This is running at 1440p. We've got this set to what I would call my competitive settings. So pretty much everything high other than textures and view distance, which are set to epic. And as you can see, we're currently getting a monumental frame rate of around about 250 FPS.
No!
This is so stupid. This is the third game I've played. Why do I do this in ranked? This is so stupid. I'm not interested in finishing 93rd. It's a joke. I mean, the frame rate on this is so good. I want to be here and be really positive. But instead, no. You're just going to get me moaning and moaning and moaning. It's a joke. But yes, if you do want to play this game, 1440p, all of these settings, you can expect about 220 to 240 FPS. How boring. Take a look at the top left-hand corner of your screen and you'll see that in terms of our CPU, we're currently sitting around about 67 degrees, which, bear in mind, this is a 65-watt chip. I mean, yeah, you could do some overclocking on this if you really wanted to. Pretty ridiculous. You know, you don't need a 360 all-in-one for this, but obviously if you want it to look as good as possible as we do here, kind of makes sense. But then in terms of that GPU temperature, it's so low, I almost don't believe it. It's ridiculous, around about 46 degrees. So clearly, we're not got any issues with temperatures, thermals, or anything like that. And when it comes to our acoustic test, very, very quiet. This has actually been set to the quiet preset. You could tune this a little bit more if you wanted to, but there's no need. And to be fair to Corsair, one of the things I really like about their ecosystem is when they say quiet, it actually is quiet. There are so many different like coolers and things on the market, but you usually need to tweak these yourselves, add like your own custom curves and things, because quiet isn't always quiet. So yes, definitely a very good thing to see. And overall, I'd say that this has actually been a very interesting rig, because I can't really fault it other than the price, because obviously if you do want the best value possible, then buying all of these expensive RGB fans is clearly not the most sensible use of money. You could save some more money on getting a like slightly lower specs GPU as well, so maybe, as I say, get it like the gaming OC. You don't need a case as expensive as this, but obviously the whole point of what we're trying to do here is to create something truly beautiful. And even someone that's not into PC gaming or even tech, I'm sorry, but if they came in and actually saw this, they would be very, very impressed, or at least I think they would, but maybe that's just because I'm I'm a nerd. So for everyone watching this, I just have one simple question for you. What is the right balance between visuals and performance? How much would you be willing to spend extra on a gaming PC to make it look super pretty versus just going for bog standard performance? It's a serious question. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, then please smash the like button, get yourself subscribed. And of course, as always, if you are interested in current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, you can find it all listed down below with our affiliate links. But thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.